70% of Bangladesh has seen targeted Hindu killings. Women are picked up and dumped into vehicles, kidnapped Hamas style in Bangladesh.
Hindus in Bangladesh have faced escalating violence, including arson, mob attacks, sexual assault, temple demolitions.
Bangladesh's growing anger towards India is rising with every passing day. From anti-India demonstrations backed by the ISI to the besieging of the Indian embassy and the targeted killings of Hindus. These incidents reflect a troubling escalation of tensions. Since the fall of the Sheikh Hasina government in August 2024, the diplomatic air between New Delhi and Dhaka has shifted from a golden chapter of cooperation to a tense and suffocating standoff. What India is witnessing is not merely a change in administration in the neighboring country, but a fundamental restructuring of Bangladeshi national identity that is being aggressively engineered to be anti-Indian.
7 states of India, eastern part of India, called Seven Sisters. They are landlocked country, landlocked region of India. They have no way to reach out to the ocean. We are the only guardian of the ocean for all this region. So this opens up a huge possibility. So this could be an extension of the Chinese economy.
It is a coordinated campaign driven by specific political factions that view India's historical role in the 1971 war not as a liberation but as the beginning of a different kind of subjugation. To understand why India's strategic silence is falling, one must first identify exactly who is holding the megaphone in Dhaka and what they are saying. The primary engine behind this anti-India surge is the resurgence of Jamaat-e-Islami.
The entire regime change operation was done with the Jamaat-e-Islami of Dhaka in charge. It was conducted by Pakistan with support of external forces. And now these Jamaat-e-Islami are trying to whip up a frenzy. What they have realized, what the Jamaat-e-Islami thought that they would be able to get the majority, but then they realized that what Muhammad Yunus has done in the last 18 months has made the people very unhappy. The economy is in total doldrums, factories are closing down, there's inflation, rampant unemployment. So people are very unhappy and they are saying that it was better earlier when Sheikh Hasina was there. So to counter this lack of popularity of the Jamaat-e-Islami, they are trying to whip up all kinds of frenzy.
For decades, this hardline Islamist party was sidelined due to the collaboration with the Pakistani army during the 1971 Liberation War. However, in the current vacuum, they have re-emerged as a dominant street power, aggressively pushing a narrative of Islamic nationalism that inherently rejects secular ties with India. Their ideology is simple. They equate Indian with Hindu and Awami League, thereby painting any cooperation with New Delhi as a treason against Bangladesh's sovereignty. Riding alongside Jamaat is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, effectively led from exile in London by Tariq Rahman. While the BNP has traditionally been centre-right, they have opportunistically adopted a fierce anti-Indian rhetoric to galvanize support. By framing India as the hegemon that kept Hasina in power artificially, they have successfully tapped into public anger. This political opportunism has bled into the student wing as well. Groups like the newly formed Inqilab Mancha have been vocal in their hostility. Student leaders who once spoke of democracy are now heard chanting slogans threatening to isolate the Seven Sisters, referring to India's northeastern states, a rhetoric that was previously the domain of fringe separatists and not mainstream political activists. This shifting political tide has manifested in disturbing attempts to rewrite history. The most dangerous development for India is the revisionism surrounding 1971. The widespread vandalism of statues of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, was not just mob violence. It was symbolic rejection of the 1971 narrative that binds India and Bangladesh together. The new narrative being pushed by these factions suggests that India's intervention in the 1971 war was an act of expansionism rather than humanitarian aid. By erasing the memory of Pakistani genocide, which claimed 3 million lives, and the sacrifice of Indian soldiers who sheltered 10 million refugees, these factions are clearing the path for a geopolitical pivot away from New Delhi. And in this volatile mix, a Hindu minority has become the soft target for venting anti-India rage. The arrest of Chinmay Krishna Das, a prominent Hindu leader and former ISKCON spokesperson, on sedition charges for allegedly disrespecting the national flag, was a flashpoint. His arrest was not a simple legal procedure but a messaging to the minority community to stay silent. The subsequent violence, including the killing of a lawyer during protests and the gruesome lynching of Dipu Chandra in Mymensingh, follow a chilling pattern. Reports from the Bangladeshi Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council document over 2,000 incidents of communal violence between August and late 2024 alone, including attacks on 69 temples and the looting of hundreds of businesses. Every time New Delhi issues a diplomatic note of concern, these radical factions spin as interference, triggering fresh attacks on temples and businesses to teach India yet another lesson. Has India's response to this multi-layered crisis been paralyzed by a policy that put all its eggs in one basket, and that is of the Sheikh Hasina regime? And now that the basket has broken, leaving it to rely on wait-and-watch approach, is this silence being read as weakness by Dhaka? The interim government led by Muhammad Yunus has often played to the gallery, making provocative statements about the chicken's neck corridor and dismissing India's security concerns.
We have problems with India right now because they didn't like what the students have done. They're hosting Hasina, who's the former prime minister, who created all this problem and killed the young people.
By treating the interim government with soft hand, has India allowed these radical factions to normalize their hate campaigns? The India Out movement, which started as a social media trend calling for the boycott of Indian products, has now morphed into a state-tolerant sentiment where visa centers are besieged and Indian cultural centers are attacked. The reality is that New Delhi is no longer dealing with a friendly neighbor undergoing a transition. It is dealing with a state where the political center of gravity has shifted decisively against it, driven by factions that see hostility towards India as the primary source of legitimacy. If India chooses to share its diplomatic restraint, it possesses an arsenal of economic and administrative levers that could bring the interim government in Dhaka to a standstill within weeks. The experts argue that the most devastating immediate step would be the weaponization of energy. Bangladesh relies on India for over 1,160 megawatt of electricity every day, with the Adani power plant in Godda alone acting as a critical baseload provider, supplying nearly 1,496 megawatt of capacity. Dhaka already owes staggering dues exceeding about $800 million to the Indian power producers. A decision to indefinitely suspend this supply, citing non-payment, may plunge Bangladeshi homes and, more critically, its export-oriented factories into prolonged blackouts, experts argue. This would spark domestic unrest that no amount of anti-India rhetoric could quell. Simultaneously, experts believe that India could leverage its geography to choke Bangladesh's trade. The land ports like Petropol, Benapol are the arteries of Bangladesh economy and handle billions in trade annually. New Delhi could impose a rigorous 100% physical verification regime on all cargo, effectively halting the movement of essential commodities like onions, sugar, and raw cotton. Bangladesh's textile industry is the backbone of its economy, which contributes to over 80% of its export earnings and relies heavily on raw cotton and yarn imported from India. Any disruption in this supply chain would paralyze the ready-made garment, the RMG sector of Bangladesh, which employs nearly 4 million workers. Without Indian yarn, factories in Dhaka and Chittagong would grind to a halt within weeks, leading to mass layoffs and economic collapses, data reveals. Furthermore, essential commodities like onions, sugar, and fuel flow across the border to stabilize Bangladeshi markets. In 2023 alone, India exported nearly $11 billion worth of goods to Bangladesh. A blockade of severe restriction would send inflation in Dhaka skyrocketing, making daily life unaffordable for the common man, the common citizen, and turning public anger against the interim government, political analysts believe. Furthermore, revoking the transit rights that allow Bangladesh to access Nepal and Bhutan would leave Dhaka geographically isolated, turning its dream of regional connectivity into a logistical nightmare. On the social front, the suspension of the visa regime would be a precise strike against the Bangladeshi middle class and elite. India is the primary destination for affordable, high-quality healthcare for thousands of Bangladeshis. In 2023, approximately 450,000 Bangladeshi patients visited India for medical treatment, contributing significantly to the economy. Shutting this door would create immediate panic and turn public sentiment against the interim government's hostility. Finally, the nuclear option involves the issue of migration. If India were to aggressively expedite the identification and deportation of undocumented Bangladeshi nationals currently working in India, while simultaneously reinforcing the border security force posture to a zero-tolerance setting, it would create a humanitarian and political crisis on the border that Dhaka is ill-equipped to handle. Its shift from benefactor to barrier would unmistakably demonstrate the steep price of antagonizing a neighbor that holds the keys to your economic survival. Strategic silence is a valid tool only when the opponent respects your latent power, but experts believe that currently that respect is eroding. The mobs in Mymensingh and political firebrands in Dhaka are betting that India is too paralyzed by its desire for regional stability to react. By refusing to leverage its economic dominance from power grid to trade routes, India risks establishing a new normal where its security interests and the safety of Hindus are treated as collateral damage. A policy that relies solely on diplomatic niceties while ignoring the hard levers of statecraft is not strategic patience, it is a vulnerability that is being ruthlessly exploited by a neighbor.